All right, Jamie Baxter, welcome to the Tangent.
Matt, Father Sam, thanks for having me. Great to be with you guys. I've been looking forward to it, and it should be fun.
Yeah, it will be. It will be. I want you to know right off the bat, I don't know if you saw, but I am wearing an Exodus 90 t-shirt right now.
I just noticed that. Goodness gracious.
He was so excited to tell you about this. He's been texting me for days. Do you think he'll be impressed if I wear the merch? It's just like, I told him, I said, don't do it. Just play it cool. Play it cool.
Play it cool. No, incapable of that.
He had a flag commissioned, and he was going to hang that as his background. But I said, I think that's a bit much.
That's too much.
I actually looked into how much a forehead tattoo costs, and that was just too expensive. Can't do that. It's like it was like $100 or something like that. Jamie, no, I'm real excited to have you on the show. Mostly, admittedly, and selfishly, because Exodus 90 has had a pretty profound impact on my life. And on the life of many of my family members. And so I thought it would be fun to just tell you a story at the beginning of this episode, if you're down, if you're down to hear it.
I'm here for it. Yeah. Praise the Lord. Great. That's great.
So I won't give you like the full, I first did Exodus 90 in the year blank. Right. So this story takes
Don't worry.
place
He'll tell you that eventually. That's part of the story eventually.
Yeah. This story takes place on my second Exodus. Right. So I had, I'm currently in Pittsburgh right now. I live in the Diocese of Bridgeport with Father Sam, but I'm visiting family at the moment. And so we're shooting in remote. And my brother-in-law, Andrew, decided that he was going to do Exodus 90 with me. And this was, I think we had been visiting for Christmas. So it was December 29th. And it was the year that it started on January 1st. So I think that was 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Now
we've had a couple January 1 starts, but most recently 2 years ago.
It was the most recent January 1. So the important information for this is that Andrew, at the time of the beginning of Exodus 90, was, I think he would call himself he was a Taoist. So Andrew grew up a Presbyterian, had fallen away from Christianity and was a Taoist, and took up Exodus 90 because he needed a change. So he went into it and had said things he used to do a dry January. So he was like, okay, there's no alcohol. So that fits, and he was like, and when the prayer comes in, he told me this later on, he was like, I'll just meditate. And so he wasn't necessarily that was where he was at for that time. And admittedly, there was a lot of prayers for Andrew. And he would be okay with me telling you all this because we had him on our show. As you'll see at the end of this story. So we start doing Exodus 90 and he's my anchor. So we're calling back and forth every day.
Yeah.
And it was actually just the two of us. So I know we broke protocol by not having a fraternity, but we had anchors. Okay. And it works out well in the end. But about 9-10 days into doing Exodus 90, we're on the phone and we I don't know who said it to do, but we decided we were going to pray together. And so we started praying together over the phone. And then maybe 2-3 weeks into Exodus 90, Andrew starts praying to God. And this is a big deal for myself and my family. And I after that, that prayer session, I report back to my wife and I'm like, Renee, you're never going to believe this. And so he starts praying to God. And then maybe 4 weeks in, he starts praying directly to Jesus. And we're like, okay, I see where this is going. Well, lo and behold, by day 50 of Exodus 90, after having begun as a Taoist, with I don't want to say a healthy agnosticism, but certainly a religious agnosticism, Andrew becomes a catechumenate in the Catholic Church. And so by Pentecost, he joins the Catholic Church. So Exodus 90 has had this incredible impact on our family life. Because, and I can just attest to this, Andrew is incredibly on fire for the faith, and so true. Now I want to be very clear here. I did nothing to get Andrew to do Exodus 9.
That's accurate.
I did not ask him. He found out I was planning on doing it and was like, I think I'll give it a shot. So I can't take any credit here. But I thought that I would express my thanks to you on my behalf and on his behalf for your work with Exodus 90.
Oh, that's so humbling. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that story. Obviously all conversions, the fruit of grace, and it's ultimately the Lord pursuing us.
Yeah.
And I was just listening actually to, I'm really kind of into this author right now, this Substacker named Paul Kingsnorth, who's becoming a big deal. Is really kind of a technology Scrooge, an AI skeptic, and just so smart, wicked smart. And one of the things he talks about was he grew up in kind of as an ecologist and like green kind of person, and just hated the thought of Christianity. And he liked just meditation without God. What would have said he was an atheist at a certain point before that, and but Christ came for him in his story, basically, is what he says, through his dream and then through a couple of other people. And so anyway, as you share that with me, all I'm thinking is like, hey, at Exodus, what we're trying to do is set a formation context for regular, normal guys, and then just kind of till the soil, if you will, for grace to come, for the encounter of the Lord, to happen. So, yeah, thank you for sharing that. That's awesome to hear, but also, your friend too, just for the courage to respond and make adjustments and change, which is heroic and worthy of a lot of praise. But I also love the story because a lot of the times I hear people talk about Exodus 90 in the church, and I think we get really can get misframed as this is for like super Catholics.
Yeah,
and it's just not true. That's just not the experience actually on the ground. And in our own formation, as you begin, we encourage our guys to really pray and ask the Holy Spirit, for who's the man, to invite. So even though you didn't invite him, that's the
don't get me wrong. I
instruction.
told him he should do it.
Yeah. So, but that's the instruction, right? And so you do find these. About 10% of our guys aren't Catholics. And,
wow,
I
really?
love that.
That high?
It's really, yeah. And I hope that only grows, over time.
Yeah.
So anyway, I love hearing that story. It's a beautiful representation.
Yeah, he and I are going to do St. Michael's Lent.
Okay,
so he
cool.
and he knew this interview was coming up, so he was more than happy for me to share with you that story.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, thank you.
Before we jump into St. Michael's Lent, which I really want to know more about this, I think it's a fascinating revival that you're doing here. Can you give us, Jamie, just a little bit of the background of how you came to establish Exodus 90 and what the goal is and what you're doing and how long you've been serving men and helping them to grow?
So you mentioned to me you're a priest for 17 years, which is, I respect that. That's awesome. I've been at this now for 10. Okay. Before that, I grew up in central Indiana. My parents, really my story begins with my parents, and I didn't really realize this fully appreciate it till later on, but my parents got brought back to the faith through the Cursillo movement, the charismatic renewal.
Oh, yeah.
And it was just
my parents were super involved with Cursillo as well.
Really? Okay. Yeah, amazing. Yeah, huge impact on our family. And I've experienced this as a kid in a really interesting way where it wasn't just that there were like pictures of Jesus up and around, but I felt like our relationships were different. And, also just the life of my father, the example that he set for us was different after that. And so I remember waking up every morning and seeing my dad just chewing on the word of God every morning. And sometimes he'd notice I was there. Sometimes, he wasn't, but, he's a man who is so obviously in touch with someone invisible. So like as a young kid, like I'm practicing the faith, whatever, but this is like before my real awakening, to the possibility that all this stuff might be real. And it just made a huge impact on me. I just tell you a quick story. We were on vacation together not so long ago. And it was actually the day we were leaving. We were up, too early, in my opinion, to get out of town. And I forgot something at his house that they were renting. And so I'm trying to like break into the house basically to get it. And there my dad is, 20 years later in like, just as I remember as a kid. I mean, he's just a really remarkable man. And without him, I'm not, obviously I'm not here, but it's also, I'm not the Christian that I am. And so I'd go on to seminary at the age of 18. There's an impact of a boys fraternity, serving fraternity that I was a part of, a kind of a virtue, formation in virtue that was really powerful for me locally. And I'd go on to the seminary. And so it was kind of within this context that Exodus 90 was begun, and when I in time I would discern I had a calling. It just wasn't quite what I had thought. I began working on it basically the day that I left, and it was on the Feast of St. Michael the Archangel, September 29th in 2015. And so really, if I had to like distill the whole thing down, it's, I felt, I don't know what you would say, Father Sam, but I felt so fortunate to go to seminary. I felt so fortunate to be there when I was there. This was like after much of the renewals of, the programs for priestly formation, after all the scandals. And I felt so blessed by it. I remember going home, and sharing about my experiences with my parents. I was in our community, and my mom, she'd often remark like, "Man, this formation's really such a good thing, but why don't all Catholic men, have an intentional formation like this?" And that kind of stuck with me. And so I hope for Exodus to be something like that, trying to create that space of a formation, trying to bring together the dimensions of our humanity, and grafting them onto Christ, so that we can be effective ambassadors of the gospel for the callings that we all have, in the church and in the world today. So that's what we're up to. And I'd love to say it's like this linear story that was all obvious, but that's just all ridiculous. I mean, for years I really didn't know that it would work out. It wasn't much to show for it, to be honest with you. And it's kind of like planting a tree. I learned recently that many trees don't do anything. And this is reflects my own lack of touch, how out of touch I can be with the earth. Though I have recently planted a garden to try to overcome this. Okay. But it can take years, for trees to do anything. And I kept running into this like 3-year marker. And I think Exodus is kind of like that. The first couple of years, it was just, I remember meeting my father-in-law, and I was so embarrassed because I didn't know if I had a job, to be honest with you. And it's like when you try to tell people like, I'm trying to free God's men, it's just like, what does that mean? Who are you? And it's just, and I like was, and those are good questions, right? I'd ask the same. And I was, pretty embarrassed at the time. Fortunately for me, I would find out my now in-laws are family full of these entrepreneurial kinds of people. And I was like one with them. It was a great fit, but, but it took time. All good things, take time. And I just feel really grateful to still be at it, 10 years later. And one of the things that was just like really impressed upon me, both by my father, but also by my time in seminary, is that good men stay. And it's so easy in our time today to run from thing to thing to thing. And even within kind of the apostolate, to just like jump from thing to thing to thing. And I feel grateful that, it's had its different phases, and I'm just trying, the best that I can to kind of grow with it as we seek to improve for the men that we serve.
So awesome. What was the turning point? Right, because you said it went through these phases, right? Like, when were you like, oh, it is a thing,
Yeah, it was really, it's like 2017, 2018 timeframe. And we like grew, we had a couple hundred guys at that point. And we added like 1,500 overnight. And and it was so ridiculous that I guys, I'm embarrassed to say this. I didn't even I was like, I'll look at that next week. I didn't even there must be a mistake. It's kind of what I thought. See. And right. I literally went through the weekend and didn't think much about it. I was like, okay, so what's going on? And basically this was, 90 days to Easter, and I think maybe it was 2017. And this is just, there's a, we didn't come up with the 90 days to Easter thing. We had just started it as a 90-day program, and then that happened to us. And like so many of the things we create, they, probably your show, they take on a life of their own, and
we're still waiting for ours.
That's what kind of happened.
That's it, Jamie. You're our big break.
Yeah. No
pressure. No pressure.
Yeah, that's what kind of happened. So
yeah.
But and really it's as simple as it sounds. I mean, it grew because guys had an experience and they invited their friends and men they knew. And to be honest with you, all of my attempts to grow Exodus beyond that have pretty much failed, I would say. And that's how it works.
That's awesome. Yeah. You were saying that your time in seminary was very helpful because you were recognizing this formation that you were getting and how that kind of put into your heart a desire for formation for everyone. I started seminary also at 18, but the year, I think 10 or 11 days after day one of seminary was 9/11.
Wow.
Which was then followed by Spotlight and everything that was happening in Boston and how that was breaking. And then it had its own version in every diocese. Right. And so that was my whole first year of seminary formation. And there was a lot of questions. There was a lot of stuff coming up. And I always thought that I was very blessed that the rector of my college seminary he is a really good priest. And he understood how to navigate a lot of different things. And he had the priorities right for us. And so a lot of the stuff, like the bad formation that was often available in seminaries or the lax formation, that just wasn't part of what we had. And I also wouldn't say that we had like a strict formation or a style or approach to formation that was militant or anything like that. It was very human. It was very normal, but it was also very clear. We knew what we were supposed to be about, and he really held that line with us and helped us to do that, so that as some of the different reforms of seminary formation, like you came in, by the time those reforms and those new ways of approaching formation had already been established, as those things were being instituted for us, in a lot of ways there was no change at our local level. It was when I got to the major seminary that we were finding out how some of these things, like the new PPF or these other elements of formation, some of this is really sort of new. And so there was some expansion. And then in these last couple of years, I've been thinking a lot about my own seminary formation experience and certain things that I know that I received, but I only can identify these things with certain vocabulary, especially surrounding integrity of the human person. I can only identify that because of ongoing formation stuff that I've done. And I realize now that I received this, but just maybe with a different title or with a different vocabulary around it. So anyway, that's a long way of asking.
Yeah. What was that like for you? I mean, so you're out east as this is unfolding. I mean, I was much, younger at the time, but even then, I was starting to kind of wake up to the faith. I mean, it was just like wildfire. I mean, it was devastating. But I mean, I can't even imagine starting seminary on the East Coast.
I think.
What was that like? I mean, did it make you double take? I mean, obviously, a vocation is a response to Christ, but like there are human factors and all of this.
I think that there was at the beginning there was the sort of constant thought of, what am I signing up for again? And and then a like strong determination. I never want that. I never want to be something like that. And then there was a lot of fear also attached because, of course, you go through an experience like this of seeing it on the news, and the question kind of that you can't really escape is, what if people look at me and think that that's what I'm like? What if they assume that I'm up to no good, that I'm going to abuse people? And so there was definitely this sense of fear sometimes about it. There was also it was a very big shift. I'm understanding this even now, like so many years later, I'm coming to understand this, that there was this big shift in understanding what it means that the church is able to teach with authority, that the church has spiritual authority, and the balance of the fact that the church is full of sinners. It was really hard to think that church authority, meaning the men who occupied the position of authority, could have failed so badly. And trying to help that or make that jive with the truth that the church still teaches, that these matters of faith are still true. But yeah, it was kind of tough. But there was also this sense of, we have to make it different. We have to fix this. And I really had that sense from a lot of the good priests who I knew. But it was also hard. You come down for morning prayer and then go to have breakfast after Mass and morning prayer, and the newspaper is sitting there, and it's our local paper, and it's got the names of priests. There were at least 5 priests who I knew as a kid growing up, who all had abused people, and so they were all removed from ministry. And like seeing those names on the front page, it was like it was really hard. And then of course, like knowing some of the priests who I knew and like served Mass for. And then there's this, like, from my family, like, no, nothing ever happened, so, but there's this like question, like, what if,
Yeah. Wow.
So
yeah,
like,
thanks for sharing. I mean, that's brutal. I mean, it takes just a lot of courage to just keep going, in the face of that.
I just think it's lack of brain cells, but
No, well, because honestly, even, so when I would have entered in 2009, in the Catholic community, and I think this is very different depending on your diocese, but
yeah,
it was very like warmly respected. But as soon as you went out to coffee or the world in any way, other churches, like, it's just like, I thought I knew you, you were the golfer, you were, and then it's, so what happened to you? Are you weird? And like, I very much remember just the stigmas and the, the fear, the concern. And that, I remember working through that myself, and obviously much different and less, I would say probably much less difficult than when you're going through as, the bombs are dropping. But at the same time, I think the thing I always try to hold together, you mentioned this idea of, being part and being fortunate to be blessed to be part of, the spotless bride of Christ, while also the church being made up of sinful members like each of us. I think for me, one of the ways that, and this is true not just in this, but in other aspects of my life too, is, everything that has happened, if we can persevere in the love of God, is unfolding for our greatest good. And it's hard to persevere in the love of God. I completely understand when people give up, and I've seen that in my own life. But I look back at some of those greatest challenges, and there's been obvious fruit, that's come from that accountability. I mean, obviously, and it's that's been a truth that I've kind of latched onto as I kind of reflect on all that sense. And that's in no way to devalue or to excuse the sin, that needs to be condemned.
Yeah,
I think I had it a little bit easier in the sense that I was a college seminarian, so I wasn't wearing this at the time. So when I went out in public, like, unless I told you I was a seminarian or you recognized my picture from the vocations poster, you didn't know who I was. You didn't know that I was in the seminary. So by the time, like, I was going off to theology and started wearing clerical attire, by then the scandal stuff had really kind of calmed down. Not that it wasn't still scandalous, but like, it wasn't on the front page every single day. It was something that clearly we had without question addressed. We had done something about. We had started taking steps, so that made it a little bit easier. But I heard stories later on when I was serving as vocation director. I heard stories from guys who had been vocation directors during that time. Oof. And the National Conference of Diocesan Vocation Directors, NCDVD, that year, like the year that everything really broke, the convention was in all places in Boston. So every vocation director in the country is coming to Boston to talk about promoting priestly vocations in this really chaotic context. And apparently at the time, NCDVD was like run by a religious sister who didn't wear a habit and didn't believe in the all-male priesthood, or that celibacy was a discipline that was necessary. There was all kinds of chaos. Again, this is what I've been told. They would come for the convention and they had Mass, but not everybody would show up for Mass. Like, vocation directors weren't showing up for Mass together. And so there was a group of vocation directors from around the country who had all studied in seminary together. And so they knew one another and they knew what they were about and what they wanted. And they realized during that week that this was, as an organization, was going in the wrong direction. And so they just, at one like general session of everybody, they just got up and said, if this doesn't change, we're leaving. And whoever was in charge of the executive board said, well, we're not going to make any changes. And they got up and they walked out. And what they didn't know was how many other guys got up and walked out with them. So they realized this organization is going to fall apart if we don't change it. So they basically demanded the resignation of every single board member, elected themselves. And now NCDVD is this amazing organization that, like, if you go to the convention, I used to love the convention. It was like my favorite week of the year. You just go, it was like a class reunion. It's a whole bunch of guys I was in seminary with. And then other guys who were like, I felt like I was at home. These guys, they all get me. Mass every day. Every single priest who's there says mass. All the priests dress like priests for the whole week. There's adoration in the morning, and guys are coming down and making holy hours. There's confession available every day. And guys, you see a line of priests waiting to go to confession, and you're like, this is what we're supposed to be. This is how we're supposed to be doing things. Anyway, that's a really long tangent into
this is why the show
question
is called
that
Tangent.
The question I wanted to ask you, Jamie, is as you were a seminarian and studying and then realizing that this formation was needed all over, what were the things from your seminary formation that you wanted to bring to Exodus 90 that you could then bring to the church at large?
So I think, you mentioned this, the integrity of the person, something that you have a language for after, that was kind of through and through everything for us. I awoke to the faith really at 15 and really developed, just by God's grace. I was like super interested in golf, and I was super interested in the church. And it's really at a time of like constant exploration, spiritually and intellectually for me. And I look back on that time, and I love that time, and I kind of miss that time too. Like when you're just onto something for the first time, you can't even sleep. You just like searching. And that's how it was for me. I mean, for years. And I was just so satisfied. I mean, the more questions I asked, the more satisfied I was, honestly. And, and then, the prayer kind of started to take. So I say all that because, a lot of times guys will talk about, oh man, I really didn't have much of a prayer life, which is kind of a weird thing that young seminarians do say. Like, obviously they're praying somewhat, or you're not discerning a vocation, but you often hear that. But for me, it wasn't so much like the prayer element, just because of my dad, because of, my parish and stuff, like that was all there. I think for me, it was just this idea that, the cross is a measure of everything. And I think up to that point, the faith still was quite bracketed for me. And I didn't quite fully comprehend, if you take the master at his word, well, nothing is exempt from him. And I did not fully appreciate that before. And that's not just true of what we can know and learn and the truths we can encounter, all of which, if true, unite, in his face. But it's true of our own lives, right? And the dimensions of our lives and our own darkness as well, and our own sin and our struggles too. So I think that was so profound for me. I think that was at a time where I really just got in touch with my own heart, not being afraid to just broach the topic of a man's emotion, which, I wouldn't say I was super attuned to, before I really went to the seminary.
Most teenage boys are known for that, right? They're known for being in tune with their emotions.
Yeah, but getting in touch with them in a great way, and channeling them and allowing and becoming better able to discern just like the fingerprints of God, within my own thoughts and affections. That was so profound for me, I think. But also the fraternity was incredible. So I went to St. John Vianney College Seminary in St. Paul, Minnesota, which is on the campus, to throw in a lot of saints, of the University of St. Thomas in up there. Lots of saints, but SJV is what they call it. It had this reputation of being quite rigid, especially when I was there. I loved it, to be honest with you. I loved all the formality, all the just everything about it, the customs, the the elder men kind of mentoring the younger men. And I think, it was there too that I really felt known, like I hadn't before, really. And so I'd say every one of these things, I mean, I reflect upon that experience all the time, honestly, in our work today, trying to apply as best we can what I think are the truths there. But, I think as well, just the idea, if we fully come to embrace the humanity, our own humanity, we go much farther than if we try to act as though we're just intellect and will. Mm-hmm. There's a lot more to us, and we all know this if we're honest with ourselves. But I think especially when you start reading Catholic stuff, you can really lose the heart, really lose the body, and get stuck in the mind. And there's nothing wrong with that. All problems start at the level of ideas, to some extent, which you gotta work out. But that was just a real impact for me. So, I wanted, and I really do want to give full credit. I mean, Exodus, like the first iterations of this were a seminary formation experiment, and it wasn't like a formal thing. It wasn't like a formal program. It was just kind of an underground thing, honestly. And I wasn't even in these groups. I was just friends with them from a distance in another seminary, but knew what was going on, and I kind of took all of my experience with this together and tried to weave it all together for others. So, without them, would I be doing this? No way. But what it is today is kind of unrecognizable from where it started. At the same time. So. Anyway, I'd say, all of those things, all of those emphases I've wanted to kind of bring into our work, and I think has been, and it's not something, it's also a work in progress. I don't look at what we're doing as like a book you write, you put on a shelf and it stays the same. I mean, we redo everything every year. So, yeah. Where we are now, it's very far from where we were in 2015. It's not different really from a priest showing up on it's his assignment on day one. Is the parish where you want it to be? Probably not, and the same's been true for us. And so, those are kind of the, I guess, points of emphasis for me that I've tried to sew into the formation we offer.
That's awesome. SJV it's a great place. I hold it in really high regard as a seminary and what they do. And yeah, that reputation for being a rigid place, I think it's stupid. Because it's almost like they understand that young men, especially college students, actually need structure and thrive when you give them structure. And it's I think the biggest knock there is that there's structure. And people think, oh, that's rigid because you're asking these young men to get up and do things early in the morning. It's like, yeah, but they can do it. They're capable of it, and they're actually going to thrive when you do it. Anyway, I don't have an issue with that. I think that's all really good. It's just dumb to say anything else.
Yeah, and I think there's a space too for a lot less structure at an older age, formation for older men. But at 18, you have no idea. Like you don't. Yeah, you need to be told what to do, and more than that, you want to be told what to do. Right. And I just found that to be so helpful. I mean, just as a quick story. So I ended up going to seminary on a bit of a whim, to be honest with you.
Well, I got nothing else to do, so let's try this out.
I was supposed to go to IU. I was going to try to play golf there, and literally a week and a half before school starts, I'm like, oh man, maybe I need to go to seminary. And somehow everything happened, with our vocations director, with the seminary to take me in. And I don't even really know how. There's no way that this could happen today, probably. But it was amazing. We sent them an email, this vague note, like, "Hey, we're going to be on campus." I'd literally never been to the state of Minnesota before. Okay, and we just sent them an email. We're like, "Hey, we're going to be on campus on this day. It'd be nice before we start on day one to kind of get a feel for the place." And I kid you not, my RA and my fraternity leader were there to greet me at the door when I walked in. And I had this formal meeting with the rector, Father Bear, may he rest in peace. He's a great man. And And it was like, that set the tone of my 4 years. It's just like, that's intentionality. Wow. And you can look at that and you can straw man it and you can say, wow, those guys waited at the door for me to show up at any point during the day. And the answer to that was yes, they did. And you know how much that meant to me? Everything. That's why I'm talking about it right now. And so, and then obviously as I became older, I tried to, bestow some of that intentionality into the place when I had my opportunity to do so. And there's a lot of stories about that too. So, it was a sacred time for sure.
So you're talking about intentionality, and 10 minutes ago you were talking about how sometimes seminarians will say, I didn't have much of a prayer life. One of the things that I love about Exodus is that, like, when I describe it to people, I say that Exodus is the place where I learned that there's no such thing as lukewarm Christianity, or like there shouldn't be. Exodus is the place where I learned that everything gets taken up into it, including the temperature of your shower. Like, even that small detail brought into the faith, but we're also talking about structure, and so obviously there's all these disciplines. I guess I'm curious because silent prayer in particular is one of the disciplines that Exodus rolls out for the various seasons. Is that what you call them?
Yes.
And so how do you encourage the men to pray? What are you looking for that from them when you say engage in 30 minutes of silent prayer?
Yeah. I'd say, you'll know this from your experience, but there's so much more that meets the eye, when we can be still, and, I'd say later on, the greatest influence on my own imagination, my Catholic imagination, has been John Henry Newman, now a doctor of the church. Let's go. Happy to see that.
So cool.
But one of the things he just, he really brings out in so many of his sermons, even, from before he was a Catholic, formally, was just the idea of the invisible world, that what we see with our eye is not even half the equation of reality. And this is actually a big theme of St. Michael's Lent for us each year now. But, the same is true, when we become still, it's not that we withdraw. It's not that we cancel our emotions, our humanity, our heart. I think if anything, we become much more aware of what's going on. So Newman used to say, I'm never less alone than when alone. And I just love that. I love that. And so what we try to do, and we can do this better, and we'll keep chasing it. It's something I always think about, is we just try to provide a kind of standard for, hey, it's good to read our readings. We appreciate you doing that. It's good to read the Bible. You should do that anyway. It's obviously practice the sacraments. These are the fundamental encounters with Christ, through the church. Mm-hmm. He wants to know you, and he wants you to know him. And, I had a guy in my fraternity this past year. This was the biggest unlock for him. When he started, he's just like, what do I even talk about? And, I think I said something like, hey, just ask him as though he can answer you. Talk to him as though he can hear you. And just see how that goes. Okay. And then by the end of the experience, months later, I'm receiving these notes about his prayer, and it's incredible. And so it's like, that's not us doing that. It's us just saying, like, hey, you can do this. Mm-hmm. You were made for this. And the Lord is alive. He will play his part. And of course, you can kind of like strawman this too, where it's like, really, I just need to be still and God shows up. Am I controlling him or something? And that's just not the case. So a big influence on me and our whole team the last couple of years has been a bishop from Norway named Bishop Eric Varden. Written a couple stunning books. I think he's a really important voice for our time. And we are incorporating a lot more of his thought. We're actually doing a podcast this year on the Desert Fathers, which I'd love to talk about at some point. Yeah. And that's been
whenever you want.
Okay. Yeah, it's been a highlight of my year, without a question. But one of the things he talks about, and this was within actually some addresses he made. So he was the abbot of a Trappist monastery before he was made a bishop. And one of the things he talks about in one of his fraternal addresses is how it's not as though we can induce God's favor, but it's that when we construct a dwelling, God comes to dwell. That's how he works. And, I think our prayer lives are something like that. So
That's
it's in no way to
awesome.
devalue vocal prayer. It's in no way to devalue, just our, novenas and rosaries and Divine Mercy chaplets. All that is so important. All that's so good. We also really need to be still and invite the Lord into our lives. And we should, it's a relationship, right? It's meant to be. And there's so much actually that we can take from our human relationships and apply them, I think, to the spiritual life. There's a priest, Father Boniface Hicks, who's, I think, done a masterful job of really
friend of the show.
About. Oh yeah, awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, friend of mine too. If I may, I feel humbled to say. And he teaches about this so well in his book, Personal Prayer, and he's become a spiritual guide to our men as well over the last couple of years. So I think it's just, and I think the thing that's so cool is like your friend's story, which is pretty dramatic and exceptional, I would say, Matt, about Andrew. For a lot of a lot of other guys, it's not quite so profound, but it is, still impactful. And can you even, when I look concretely at the days where I don't get in the prayer that I have committed to, which does happen, I'm not quite myself. And I certainly have a lot less clarity, about decisions that I'm facing. Yeah. That's all we try to invite the guys to.
Yeah. On Wednesday this week, which is August 6th, for whoever's listening to this later on, that was Pope Leo's Wednesday audience. He talked about being prepared, or the preparation that's done, and that it's God who first prepares. And then there's like this way for us to respond. And just his notion of prepare was so beautiful, because it was, that God's already prepared the good things for us, but there needs to be a way for us to respond. So maybe before we dive into St. Michael's Lent, we just talk a little bit about Exodus 90 as those like 90 days leading up to Easter, to help us to prepare to enter more deeply into Lent, because of course you've got Lent built right into the entire program. So as you're doing that, what are your primary goals, and what are the tools that you give to men as they're going through these 90 days leading up to Easter?
One of the things that's kept me interested in this whole thing after 10 years and still going is, because I'd just be super blunt. Boredom's a real thing. If anyone's really attentive to their life and honest with themselves and others, like boredom's a real thing. I used to be really afraid to admit to this, actually, because I didn't want people to think like, oh, are you not committed? Do you not care? This is a mission after all, And then you read the Desert Fathers, and from St. Anthony, one of the greatest saints of the history of the church, down, they're all just like, one of the greatest struggles of the desert was boredom. Just sheer boredom at, the kind of chasing after perfection in Christ with zero distractions, other than the devil who shows up all the time. Right? And so, I just say that, like, one of the things that has helped me to keep going is what difference I see in the guys that we meet. It's impossible. I used to have these thoughts on, okay, this is who Exodus is for, this is who it's not for. This is when you're ready, this is when you're not ready. And all those things have just been proven so wrong over time in concrete faces. That my new approach is like, it's for who it's for. If it's for you, you're welcome to join us at any point. If it's not, no problem. The church is such a diversity of gifts and charisms. So, I think that's
you can listen to the tangent instead.
Yeah. So,
if you want to be bored,
no. But I think that's what's kept me so interested is guys at such different places can find something for them. Part of that is because at the very beginning of our experiences, we always ask guys to consider and to discern, like, why are you here? And a part of that is, who do you want to become? There's a great story about St. Francis's kind of beginning conversions I'd love to get into at a later point, but we're really trying to get men to explore that. I can tell you, though, wherever you think you come, it's always for, much different reasons, but those are kind of the first, important questions, to ask right at the beginning and to guide you as things become challenging. Living, a consistent prayer life, practicing asceticism, committing to others locally, those are not easy things to do. They're hard things.
Yeah.
I mean, just on a human level, they're hard things, but I mean, then you factor in the fact that, there's a war, going on all the time around us, and there's a whole other reason it's hard. So, I think those things are, I think that's what's, really kind of kept me going, is just how many different guys in different places, different vocations, different places in the spiritual life, barely started at all, can find something, and somehow it has managed to kind of receive that. The other thing about this too is, I kind of thought this was like a U.S. thing at the beginning, and that's just been proven so far wrong. And I'm really excited actually about many a couple parts of the world where it's kind of really taking right now.
Nice.
And it's been
That's
helpful,
awesome.
and we'll keep that going. So, I think in essence, when I think about Exodus, it's just to really discern, like, hey, where am I unfree? Where am I? Am I? And just to ask yourself and give permission to yourself to speak in a way. Just am I thriving? Am I flourishing? And just really sitting with yourself and listening to what you have to say back, which is always the scary part, I think. And that can become, I think, very, very motivating, because, life with the Master, who is Christ, is life that we've been made for, and I think leads to it, can lead to, though through suffering for sure, profound joy, and participating now in the joys of heaven, and it's unspeakable joy. That's one of the things I pulled out from a recent saying. At the beginning, it's tough. Later on, it's unspeakable joy. What happens to you when you kind of commit to this lifestyle.
Awesome. So tell me about St. Michael's Lent, because this is something that I've heard of, but not heard of. You know what I mean?
For sure. Yeah, nobody has.
Yeah. And so to just see that you guys are doing this, and all right, Lent is 40 days, Exodus 90 is all of Lent plus the 50 days before Lent begins. Tell me about St. Michael's Lent. It sounds really cool. And all right, I'll add to that. Is it easier or harder than Exodus 90?
Yeah. Well, maybe before I go there, I would just say we offer daily personal formation for men, kind of on some of these values we talked about already. And not everything we do is ascetic in nature.
Mm-hmm.
In a Catholic vision, our fasts our preparation. They're just training. I almost want to say they don't matter, but they do matter. What matters ultimately is growing in the love of God, becoming a dwelling of the Holy Spirit, and ultimately celebrating, worshiping God. That is, when God liberates the people of Israel, the problem that Pharaoh has, there's many, but it's what does God want? He wants them to throw a festival to him. He wants them to them to worship him. And, that is what our fasts are for. They're training for worship and for festival. So, though well known, we throw, I think, a pretty banger Easter experience to really tries to flesh out, okay, what is this 50 days of Easter? And, through all my years at this, it's like, who's cracked the code on the Easter season? I don't hear that a lot. Easter is so often a day. Sometimes, sometimes it lasts through the octave.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
But so easily fizzles into nothing, and so I just want to be clear. It's like when you think about Exodus 90, now we're talking about St. Michael's Lent. It's like, gosh, these guys just like Lent all the time, and that's just not true. So, and I'm not saying like we figured it out perfectly, but we're really thinking about festivals and festivity, kind of drawing on the richness of the philosophical tradition of the church to do that as well as we can, in a time that's just like totally forgotten rest and festivity. I mean, heck, we're in a Jubilee, okay? And it's like the Jubilee, it's so easy to say, but like when you look at the challenge of the Jubilee, it's not just that we rest on Sundays. It's at the end of 6 years of work, we rest up for a full year. And then after 7 of these cycles, the people of Israel to rest for another year, 2 years straight. what a risk to rest. What a risk to rely on God to provide for you.
Mm-hmm.
We all know how hard that is. And, it's why later prophets would ultimately say it's because we didn't rest, that we were exiled, and it's ultimately, Dr. Bergsman, a really awesome little book called Jesus and the Jubilee, which was really helpful to me in really understanding this whole thing from a scriptural perspective, talks about how but before Christ comes, they are waiting for someone who can fulfill the Jubilee. That is ultimately who Christ is. And so anyway, I say all of that because, our fasts are, preparations, for rest and for leisure and for the highest activities that we're capable of, as human beings. So anyway, I say all that because sometimes people are like, "Oh man, it's just like these Desert Fathers guys." And I'm like, I love the Desert Fathers.
These
we talk about
Desert
them all the
Father
time,
guys.
but we're not lenting all the time. So I just want to kind of make that clear.
Hey,
So St. Michael's Lent.
It's not that I want to interrupt you, but I want you to tell me how should I celebrate? Because I gave Easter 50 a shot this year, and I will humbly admit that I didn't do a very good job. And it was because after like 10 days, I was like, man, I actually realized, and admittedly, I probably gave up too quickly. I was like, I don't know how to do this, and like there were some elements of it where I figured it out, where I was like, oh, feasting doesn't mean smashing my face with cookies every day,
Mm-hmm.
and so like I stopped, doing that, I guess. But you know what I mean? Like, what is it? How should one celebrate the Jubilee? How should one celebrate Easter season?
Yeah, so that's a good form of feedback for me, and I appreciate that because I think
that wasn't a critique of you. I love
that. I'm after just kind of constant improvement and growth. So I'd say it is a challenge, but it is so part of being God's people. I think that for so many guys, obviously I'm speaking from a very U.S. place when I say this, but rest is entertainment. And I'm all for entertainment. Okay. Like I love the Indianapolis Colts. Okay. The Pacers on that run. That was a thrill for me.
My brother-in-law Andrew played basketball with TJ McConnell growing up.
Dude, TJ, what a baller.
Yeah. I know.
So I'm all for it. It's just that, entertainment, it does not rejuvenate us, on a natural level. And what I think rest, what Sunday is for, what the Jubilee should be for, is engaging in the highest activities of man, all of which are contemplative. So obviously reading inspired word, but also just reading good books. It's been too long since I've been in a good Catholic novel, and I stumbled into Sigrid Undset's Kristen Lavransdatter. And it's just a story, of kind of the medieval Catholicism in Norway. But boy, it just opens up dimensions of my mind that were not opening before I got into the book, and I think that there's something in my own experience there that's somewhat illustrative. But music, as well, listening to good music, classical music, learning, playing instruments, art, trying to, engage the arts however you do. Now, when you have kids, this is, I think, actually quite easy. My kids love doing art. Basically, making art every day. So, I would just say like those are a couple of things that I think will continue to sow into it. Obviously, Easter also has
relate to that. I've gotten fantastic at sidewalk chalk.
Let's go. Yeah.
Man,
yeah.
You should see the stick figure flower I can make. Incredible.
Yeah. I also think, there are communities that I think and local expressions do like festivals really well. I'm thinking of a parish in Lafayette called St. Boniface, and they do this St. Boniface Day bonanza. It's just such a huge thing. There's Eucharistic procession. It's days long. People travel in for it. Like that kind of stuff. That's festival, and we don't have enough of that. I think we need more parties, so I think that should be a part of this whole thing. So anyway, I don't pretend to be Yeah, I don't pretend to be cracking the code. It's just kind of asking us to remember. I mean, these celebration days, these feasts, really were, I mean, what shaped time, for Christians throughout history. It's not, they didn't wake up and like, oh shoot, it's the Transfiguration today. It was a very different imagination. And hey, we are where we are, and it is what it is. But what can we do to maybe remember a couple things we've forgotten, and hey, maybe bring them into an expression they weren't in before. I don't know. At the same time, I think for me, what I'm a little hesitant of all the time is I'm huge on local stuff, which is somewhat ironic now because we run this like global thing. We do try to embody everything in local experience, which is why like a lot of people don't know who I am. I try to stay very behind the thing. It's the opposite of, and I when I say this, I don't want this to come off as a criticism to personality based things, because there's some awesome people doing great things. But Exodus isn't that. Like it's me and none of our guys on our team claim to be these gurus or anything. We kind of look at ourselves as like first learners, kind of in this whole thing.
That's awesome.
And so I say all that because these expressions of festivity should have a real local kind of character. That's different,
it strikes me that like throwing a party and hanging out with your friends is a much clearer form of flourishing than throwing a party and watching a movie with your friends, which isn't to say that there aren't good movies, but like
for sure.
You know what I mean?
Well, like, and our festivals too, they can evangelize, right? I mean, like if people who don't believe, maybe aren't where, whatever, don't believe or are on the fringes of the church are like, do I want to go have a party? I think if done well, the answer should be yes. I mean, if it's weird, they probably won't come.
Right.
So I think, I think there's really something, to that, how our times of joy, our times of festivity are evangelizing. And I think precisely because there are so few of these, expressions anymore. So anyway, there's an opportunity there. So anyway, sorry.
Yeah, I know. We're all over the place as far as seasons go. I'm sorry.
About a tangent. That's a pretty good one. But let's keep working on all that, but ours, each of us. So I think, with St. Michael's Lent, it's not a well-known thing. And obviously to make it super clear, not a liturgical season, just a devotion, entirely optional. And an invitation from us, to kind of consider. So I found out about St. Michael's Lent when I was in high school, kind of doing my exploration in the faith, as I said. And to think even, to broach the topic is to really consider St. Francis. I mean, this is at this point, you should say a Franciscan thing. We are doing our own. We're attempting to write a book right now, and It's come together really well.
Yeah, awesome.
So there are. So the thing I want to just say is the Feast of Saint Michael, which is now the Feast of the Archangels on September 29th, dates to the 5th century. I mean, old. 1,500 years from now. And we were able to find in the 11th century in England a king who actually prescribes days of fasting. Just 3, albeit, in preparation for St. Michael's Day. So, and that's not even just exceptional of Saint Michael. I mean, you prepared for feasts with fasts, in a Catholic imagination all the time. And so, but it's really Saint Francis who kind of observed this, period of preparation for St. Michael's Day, starting on the Assumption. Which is, there's this emphasis on the angels. The Franciscans themselves are called, one of their kind of nicknames is the angelic order. And it's, also it's Our Lady of the Angels. I mean, that's one of the churches that St. Francis rebuilt. It's located on top of Mount Laverna, where he would practice St. Michael's Lent, where he received the stigmata in the year 1224. And so there's this emphasis on Our Lady, the angel, St. Michael, all throughout the life of Francis, but this was an intentional period of prayer and fasting for him, in seclusion, typically with another brother or two, from what I understand. That was a part of his own, spirituality. And it was everyone, when you think of Francis, there's a couple stories everybody thinks about, but the stigmata is one of them, and he's one of just, a handful of saints, I'm sure there are many unknown, but a handful of saints too have received that. You can call it a gift, but I think it's also important not to. I mean,
it hurt.
Make it. I mean,
it's a real suffering. Yeah,
literal suffering, literal participation, and we're trying not in any way to, avoid the reality of how painful that obviously must have been, but it's also a unique grace to participate in the sufferings of Christ.
Yeah.
So those are a couple of the elements. Now we reached out. So I've known about this, and this was actually one of the things when I kind of heard about what was going on with the Exodus 90 stuff in the early days. It kind of gave me a consolation because I knew that Lent wasn't 40 days or it wasn't 90 days, right? And even if we had our pre-Lenten periods, they weren't 90 days. So it's just like, okay, all right, these extended Lents, these Lents at other times of the year, I know about these from St. Francis. I feel good about this. Let's give it a go. So that's always been there for me. And then St. Michael's had a huge role to play within the fraternity. So from the very beginning, St. Michael, we pray the St. Michael prayer, written by Pope Leo the 13th. To defend us, and our families and the fraternity. It's also, obviously I mentioned the day I started it. So in 2015 working on it. And so it's a really, there's a personal devotion that we've threaded into all of our stuff. But we reached out to the CFRs a couple of years ago and they were just thrilled. I mean, because they, I believe all, but at least many of them observed St. Michael's Lent. And they were just delighted. I mean, they were so excited about that, that we were going to do what we could to revive and resurface the devotion. And we're really blessed this year to have Father Innocent and Angelus Montgomery. They're both CFRs. They are biological brothers and they're triplets. So they're twins, but they have a sister, who was part of the triplet, who's I think back home in Nebraska.
Right. She's not a CFR.
Not a CFR. But she's the guy, they're just wonderful, wonderful holy men, and I just feel so grateful that they would kind of step into our fraternity and invite others to kind of the Exodus expression of St. Michael's Lent, and obviously on our side this is there's not a lot of we're providing a kind of expression for guys today. There's not a ton of precedent, so we're kind of we're a little bit on the edge here, and we know that. That's ultimately where I feel called to be anyway, in the service of the church. So grateful to have their leadership and guidance of our guys through this time.
That's so good.
And I'm pretty sure, you, Father Sam, you might know, but aren't Father Innocent and Father Angelus, don't they do formation for the CFRs?
I'm not sure what their role.
I feel like I listen to the Poco a Poco podcast. Shout out to the Poco a Poco podcast. It's great. Everybody should listen to it. It's the CFR's podcast. And I'm pretty sure that they've led desert trips for formation for the CFR.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. So, so Father Angelus is the vocations director. Father Innocent is the postulant director. So very close to the formation of the heart of the young man, both in discerning, but then also beginning the life of a Franciscan today in Harlem. So really holy men, like St. Francis, and obviously I've looked at the CFRs from a distance with a lot of respect throughout the years, and so humbled that they would be willing to join up. And we'll see what comes of it. You never really know. So
awesome. How does somebody do it? What's happening during St. Michael's Lent? What are we doing?
Yeah. So with all our stuff, we kind of present a plan of life. And every season's a little bit different, and we do kind of modify them through time, just as we get feedback and just try to improve. And so really the hallmark flagship discipline of St. Michael's Lent, which we started last year and guys loved and hated at the same time, which is how you're onto something, is the night vigil. So we invite guys to wake up at 2 a.m. on Friday mornings, and we lead a kind of guided hour of prayer focused on scripture, especially the Psalms. It has a real kind of monastic kind of character to it as well. and passages from Francis' life. But it can sound a little like kind of crazy to do that. But the vigil, it's a time when there's no distractions. There's not daily duties pulling you in any direction. You're in the stillness, you're in the silence, and we kind of chose 2 a.m., which is the traditional hour of matins in monasteries. I would wake up at in the middle of the night to pray. And of course, I think it's worth saying both that many monasteries still do this today, even to this day. I think of some poor Clares near me up in the middle of the night praying every day, always, not just once a week for a couple weeks.
Right.
But I also like when people think about vigils, they're like, oh man, that's so intense. But it's like, if you have kids, you're doing vigils all the time, man. Like, in a Catholic vision, and you're offering these wake ups, which happen 1, 2, 3, 5, 10 times at night.
Yeah.
It's like, no, you are making these small sacrifices of broken sleep.
Yeah.
If you can.
I wish I could remember where I heard it, but it was somebody was talking about the monks and the nuns rising in the middle of the night like that to keep those vigils, and how it was their celibacy as the complement to the vocation to marriage. Because they'll rise in the middle of the night just as parents have to rise to take care of their children in the middle of the night. And so just that idea of this is not just let me show you how spiritually disciplined I can be. Let me show you how austere I can make my life. This was a way of saying this is actually a human experience. And this is what we do out of love, just as a parent gets up in the middle of the night out of love for their child. So we will get up out of love for Christ, but also out of love for you, our spiritual children who are out there in the world dealing with this. Yeah. And I wish I could remember where I heard that, because that's not my original thought.
Take credit.
Yeah, no, I would love to. It would be great, and it would make me feel so much more justified about my sometimes reluctance to do my 3 a.m. Tuesday morning hour in the Adoration Chapel. Like, I don't feel like it. No, I wish that it was an original thought. It's not. It came from somewhere else. I just can't remember where I got it. But it has, honestly, for me as a priest, it has changed so much about how I think about those opportunities to pray in the middle of the night or to get up. Like, those vigils are so special as a result.
No, that's right. And you mentioned this too, and I do try to emphasize it, as much as I can anywhere, that asceticism is just a means. It's just training.
Yeah.
There's this tension in the tradition between these are important practices, but the end is always love. And so I would say it's easy, I think, when we think about asceticism, especially at a time when Stoicism, especially among young men, is so popular, to think like, this is about kind of pulling myself up by my bootstraps, getting it together, relying on myself, becoming resilient. And asceticism in a Catholic vision modeled, all throughout, by the saints, maybe especially by the Desert Fathers, is so different from that. These practices are just the beginning of something much more important. And that's ultimately growing in love of God and growing in love for our neighbor. And so the other thing on the ascetic practices we take up is like, if hospitality is offered to you, if someone is loving you that kind of flies in the face of your practices don't matter, and you should let them go. And we see this all throughout, the Desert Fathers. There's so many stories actually in the desert of someone, being offered, whether it be wine or, food, and they're in the middle of a fast and they always take it. And there's typically like younger monks that are like, hey, what are we doing? We said we were going to do all these things. And the older monks are always like, but those who love God more, they act like this. and I just kind of love that. So I don't know. I like to call that out. We try to teach that as well as we can within our material and the formation that we offer. It is important, but it's always a means to an end. There's this story, I pulled this out of a book Bishop Varden wrote called The Shattering of Loneliness, which is such a good book. You should get it.
Okay.
And
we'll link to it in the show notes.
It's a book on Christian, what he calls Christian memory, and calling out a couple of very specific verses on remembrance and how much of being a Christian is remembering where we have come from, and then obviously applying that to our own lives. And in one of his chapters, he tells a story of Saint Seraphim. He's an Orthodox saint, and a young man, maybe like us, shows up to this Saint Seraphim just so kind of just doesn't really understand, like, what's all the prayers and the fasts and the vigils of the church really for? He's just tired of it all. It's not working for him. And what Saint Seraphim says to him, and there are accounts of this in the public. He lived in the 19th century, I believe. Are that what he says is that ultimately these things again are means to an end, and ultimately it's about acquiring the Holy Spirit to become a dwelling of God here on earth. And this just really transformed how he thought about the spiritual life, and really transformed his life. So anyway, I just share that because it's kind of a beautiful account and representation of kind of the threads we're trying to weave here between how to teach about asceticism well and how it's very different from stoicism or any kind of machismo, which is very far from my intentions for the thing.
You said you're always open to feedback, so I'm going to tell you that does come through.
Oh, cool.
That balance.
Oh
yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
100%.
So actually, let me just read you this quote. I finally found it. I was kind of searching for it. So he says, this is Saint Seraphim. He says, prayer, fasting, vigil, and all other Christian activities, however good they may be in themselves, do not constitute the aim of our Christian life, although they serve as the indispensable means of reaching the end. So that's the balance, right? They're not the end, but they are important, indispensable. He says the true aim of our Christian life consists in the acquisition of the Spirit of God. And the fast, the vigils, the prayer, the almsgiving, every good deed done for Christ is a means to acquiring the Holy Spirit. Anyway, I love that. And I think the more we can make that known, the better. And so I'd say the night vigil is really kind of the hallmark, but that's what we're after. And it was tough. It is tough. But it's also kind of a time of great stillness, of great silence, of even deepening our prayer. So we have fasts on Wednesdays and Fridays. We take cold showers on Wednesdays and Fridays. We have we encourage guys to practice 30 minutes of silent prayer in the morning, in addition to kind of reading our readings, and we're working through Ephesians and Colossians this year. Last year we went through Tobit. So we always kind of surface and frame the thing up in Scripture. And then in the audio experience that we prepared, in addition to kind of voicing those for the guys that like the audio, the brothers are just sharing from their experience. I should say, nice. The fathers are teaching from their experience.
The brothers' fathers.
Trying to apply these things practically to men today. So that kind of constitutes the plan of life. At the same time, I would say with what we're after, it's if you're just starting, give it a shot. Do what you can. There's no such thing as a perfect journey. That's not what Exodus is for. These fraternities are really meant to be a space to talk about the deep things. And that weekly fraternity meeting, that daily encounter with the anchor, are just so important to living an embodied communal Christian life. And without them, I just think we can. I think the thing that for me in my own fraternity experience that's just incredible is I'm so encouraged by seeing what God is doing in the life of others. And I'm so inspired to stay more faithful to my own resolutions, having spent time, with other people, striving, in the same way to fulfill their own, even if they're different from mine, even if they're different vocations, and that's what those, fraternities are meant to be a place for. And the last thing I would just say is these fraternity meetings, I really think that the struggle of our time, the root of everything is loneliness. We can talk about get into branches of sin and all this, but it's why are we in these bad waters? It's at the end we're craving a connection that our world promises but so rarely fulfills. And that's what these fraternities really are for. It's a place to be known and to be held accountable to who you could be, by constant getting up and trying again. that was a bit of a tangent too, but
that's kind of what that's really good. I like that. I also appreciate the idea that like we're not going to be perfect the first time we try it, and asceticism in particular is like a means to growing in that perfection. But you have to do it. You have to start somewhere. So I'm thinking like maybe lukewarm showers.
Can I? So the first time I ever did the cold showers for Exodus, I took the cold shower and I stepped out of it and I was like, I'm a freaking superhero. That's how I felt. And then the next day I stood in front of the cold shower and I said, Lord, I cannot do this. I need you to do it for me. And that was the journey. That was the beginning. It was like I had all the gusto on day one and I had absolutely none on day two.
Yeah. No, and that's how it works, right? I mean,
yeah.
That all the wind in the sails in the beginning, that's good too, right, but when the wind is out, that's great.
Yeah.
Too,
Yeah, we were talking, Father Sam and I were talking, we did an episode on consolation and desolation recently. And so we were saying how, in that moment of consolation, praise God for it. In that moment of desolation, praise God for it. Like you roll with the punches and you roll with what he offers you. And I guess you also trust that he's offering you those different things for the appropriate reason. He knows better than you.
Yeah. No, that's right. Yeah, and I think it's just to remember as well through everything we experience, consolations, desolations, sufferings, trials. It can be hard to hold on to the cross in those moments, but having kids has been really helpful for me in so many ways because it's like I love them so much. It's almost it is unspeakable, and I'm constantly like they're about to fall. I'm picking them up, like avoiding disasters all the time in my limited means and in all of my sin and struggle and weakness. Jesus reveals, that we're in relationship with God who is a Father. And he's doing he is that infinitely, for every one of us. So, if we can just hold fast to that trust, and hope against hope, like so many of the great biblical figures, he comes through, he always comes through, even through death.
Amen.
Yeah.
That's great. Well, Jamie, thank you. This is awesome. How can people find out about St. Michael's Lent and more about Exodus 90?
Yeah, for sure. So, St. Michael's Lent, again, just a devotion we're trying to kind of revive and see where it goes. You can practice it, in any simple way. If there's just a novena to St. Michael to do before, Michael, the Feast of the Archangels, that's great. If there's more intentional prayer, fasting, or almsgiving you want to do, that can be great. But we've given a particular expression of it, for men today. We have men, young and old, but vast majority of the guys are late 20s, 30s, 40s. So, if it's for you, would love to have you join us, start a local group. But download the Exodus 90 app, which is where all of our formation happens. You can also, if you just want to learn more about St. Michael's Lent, aspects of Francis' life, whatever, we've published quite a bit of stuff on exodus90.com, about that as well. So, hey, really quick, do you have a little bit more time? Can I tell you a story? All right, all right. So everybody, I found out about. So I'm in Assisi a couple years ago, and have you guys been there?
Yeah.
No.
Okay. Do you know that iron statue out on the front lawn in front of Saint Francis Basilica?
Yeah.
The Upper Basilica? Okay. Do you know that story?
No.
Okay. So it's really, for me, I've been there a couple times, and finally on the third time, I'm like, what the heck is this? It's kind of ugly. It's off, at a distance away from the church. It's looking out into the valley. Like, what does this even mean? And I looked it up recently, and I found out a lot about it, and I think it's so, so powerful, because I think sometimes when I think about St. Francis, because he received the stigmata, because he started, probably the fastest growing religious order ever, he's one of the greatest saints in the history of the church. It can just seem so unapproachable. But at the age, he grows up, as most people know, the son of a wealthy silk merchant, and that was kind of supposed to be his trade. And everybody kind of remembers him renouncing his inheritance. Everybody kind of knows that story of kind of stripping himself naked, they say. But before that, he was a soldier. And he went off to battle at the age of 18 to fight a nearby town, I think named Perugia, about 10 miles away from Assisi, and he lost. They lost. Assisi lost, and he was imprisoned for a year as a young man. And this is kind of where he actually gets sick during this time, and starts to think about, what matters, in life. But he goes back to Assisi after a year imprisonment, okay, and goes back, just returns to his old life, basically. And he gets another opportunity to fight in a battle. He takes it. I forget the earl's name, but he's going to fight for some papal state. And he is struck with sickness so that he, like at a town, he can't even go ride on his horse to battle, okay? And what this the sculptor did is, has this scene of this young man on a horse, completely downtrodden, not looking at the basilica, not looking at the surround, Umbria, all around. He's completely downtrodden and obviously full of shame in the sculpture. And what they're, it's called the Return of Francis. And this is the view of the sculptor of Francis returning, twice a failed soldier, having no concept for who he could become. And I just say that because I think, when we're all honest with ourselves a little bit, it's like, I think there's a little bit of that in all of us, just a little bit like, man, is this really who I was supposed to be? Am I capable of more than I am giving? Am I on the right track? I think the amazing testimony of Francis is he's given extraordinary graces. He responds to them though. And step by step, he's given what he needs to become, ultimately who he becomes. His callings, obviously, to rebuild the church happen after this, shortly thereafter. And I just say that because I can identify with so much of Francis in that scene. And maybe some of your listeners can too. And I think the invitation of the sculptor is the same as the one to us, which was, Francis, look up, man. Look what you've done. It's like Assisi today is unrecognizable to what it was when he was there. Sure. I mean, when you look at it from a distance, it's on a hill. You have the basilica, lower and upper of St. Francis on one side. You have Clare's on the other. You have all these spires throughout this place. You got Blessed Carlo, there now, and all, I'm sure all these other saints throughout history.
Yeah.
The town physically is nothing like what it would have been, had he not, said yes. And so I think that the invitation of the sculptor is the same one to us. Like, hey, man, like we can become more, not on our own strength, but on the power and grace of our Lord to transform our world in his love.
I love it.
Amen.
Anyways, I wanted to tell that story because I hated the statue at first. I didn't know what it meant. It seemed ugly to me. And then afterwards, I'm like, wow, this is the coolest St. Francis story that no one knows about.
Yeah. That's really cool. Yeah, I've seen it. I never paid much attention to it. I just thought, it's not a great statue, and I just kept going. But I'm going there in October, so I'll make sure that I stop and take a look and spend some time.
Father Sam, if they sell miniature versions, I would like one.
I'll bring you one back. Yeah.
Nice.
Are you going on a pilgrimage?
Yeah. I get to be part of a Jubilee year pilgrimage, so I'll be Rome, Assisi, and Loreto. So yeah, some good stuff. I'm excited for it.
Yeah, that's great.
Hey, just out of my own personal interest.
Yeah.
In October, the season is Our Lady of Victory. Yeah. I was just curious if you could pitch that for a sec.
Yeah. So basically, what we're trying to do is graft our stuff onto the liturgical calendar. So obviously, the devotion, St. Michael's Lent's happening in ordinary time, but in October, traditionally the month of the Rosary. And so we are, kind of offering a rosary challenge, and we'll be praying the rosary, growing in devotion to Mary, encountering Our Lady of Victory, surfacing this, the story of Lepanto, her influence throughout history. Father Lawrence Liu, who's a Dominican in England, at Blackfriars, is at Oxford, is our spiritual guide, and he is the general promoter of the rosary in the world. So he goes around all the world, literally all around the church, just preaching about devotion to the rosary.
I didn't even know that was a position one could have.
Yeah, I didn't really either. And pardon me, Father Lou if I got the title wrong, but it's something like that.
Right.
It's got to be a Dominican who's got that job too, which is great.
Yeah. Oh yeah, of course. So he'll be leading us, and
that's awesome.
Very, very grateful, very humbled to have his involvement. And but yeah, honestly, in short, that's what we're trying to offer is daily formation for guys, not just as kind of start and stop experiences, but to daily grow in transformation. I mean, ultimately, we're never quite there, and but if we don't continue to move forward, we will fall back. We will conform to the ways of the world. We will compromise. I do this all the time. Personally, and it's just that's what we fight. I once heard of a monk call a monastery, like in there, he said, we fall and we get back up, and we fall and we get back up. And I want kind of Exodus to be something like that. We fall and we get back up, and we keep going. And so we basically just try to offer daily formation that hopefully speaks to and awakens the hearts of men today.
Awesome.
Jamie, thanks so much for being with us. This is awesome.
Hey, thank you. Father Sam, Matt, really humbled. Thanks for starting with that testimony too. That got me pretty fired up. To be honest with you guys, my kids woke me up on the topic of vigils like 3 times last night. I was like, oh man, 2 p.m. Eastern. This is not going to be great. I need some energy, and you gave it to me. So
good. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
St. Michael's Lent begins August 15th, runs to September 29th. The Feast of Our Lady of Victory is October 7th. When's Exodus 90 start this year?
January 5th. January 5th. So a little bit earlier.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
I'm excited now. I'm real fired up. Let's go.
Yeah, that's it. And that's it. He's on public record. Public record. Father
I
Sam.
said I'm excited.
Well, thank you guys so much for having me on. And
Father,
thank you for telling me the stories too of your ministry, especially early on. In some of those dark days. It's really inspiring to me, just your courage and perseverance. So thank you guys.
Appreciate it. Thanks for what you're doing.
Thanks for watching today's video. Let us know what you thought down below, and don't forget to like and subscribe.